And we'll now like to welcome Julie to come and join us to hear a very, very different point of view. We haven't really rehearsed this. There's the mic for you there. It's interesting, flipping really from, talking about innovation that's inside government to talking to, also another icon, an icon of the startup scene. So thank you very much for joining us. You spoke at Paws Fest this morning. I spoke yesterday. How'd you go this morning?
I think it went okay. I was on the Women in Tech panel, so it was a topic close to my heart. Flew all the way in, which you'll be happy to know. And I think it was great to have 5 or 6 of us on stage talking about what we're achieving in technology.
That's absolutely brilliant. We were talking out the back, and I didn't really plan to start here at all, but I suppose we just were really talking about Vic government, and you're going to be on either side of 2 conversations about Vic government. You are from New South Wales. What are your impressions so far, and even from afar, around what's going on in Melbourne and Sydney? Although as much as everybody doesn't want to talk about the concept of a Sydney-Melbourne divide, nor should we, let's anyway.
Look, I was actually just telling Paul and Pradeep backstage that I have actually seen a lot on Twitter. So I do a lot of my, stalking thought leaders on Twitter. And I've seen a lot about innovation in Victoria and startup funding in Victoria, and I've been very envious watching from New South Wales. And we have had a little bit of, I think we've really picked things up recently. We've got Innovation Bay now, but I have been seeing for quite a while some really great things happening here, and almost tempted me to consider a move. Can I say that?
Do it.
Fantastic.
For sure. Pradeep will actually set it up.
Will he fund that?
Yes.
We've already spent most of your 60 million, Pradeep, before you've actually come on stage. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity really to, for those people who haven't been exposed, obviously started the business back in 2012. I think if you could just maybe fill us in on Stylerunner and your own background.
Sure. I started a degree. Actually, I started a degree in science, but unfortunately it wasn't exciting enough to keep me I guess plugging through that. So I switched to a business degree and I majored in marketing, and then I got recruited into finance. So it's a good grounding for any business that I was to pursue later on. But having an entrepreneurial streak, I entered that phase of my life where I questioned what I wanted to do, and I had a bit of a sabbatical. And then I found this amazing startup in London. I sent them some suggestions and they offered me a job. So prior to Stylerunner, was working for a great startup in London. It was a subscription video on-demand service.
Can I just ask a question there at that point? Because I think it's very interesting, 2012, and before that you obviously had a great career, and this is a major, somebody said a personal pivot, that you made in life. Just on that, did you always think you were an entrepreneur, and were you kind of just killing time till the right opportunity came along, or did you have it was a moment that you went, you know what?
No, I always thought that I would be climbing the corporate ladder, but I really wanted to climb it faster than you could. So it frustrated me that you'd work really hard and you'd do some of the best work, and you may get a $2,000 bonus. Yeah. Not that it's about the finances, it's about progression. It's about reaching your full potential, which I like to say is your self-actualization. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah. So I just wasn't achieving that same sort of level of satisfaction and progress in a corporate. But I just thought as a young girl that I would grow up and one day I'd be CEO. Not a CEO of a little startup that has about 28 employees, but that was what I was aiming for, CEO of a corporate.
Well, you haven't grown up yet, so
We'll get there. Get there.
So I find that really interesting because the last job I had, to be totally honest, was actually pouring beers in a pub when I was 20, and I started IE. So I never really had any other experience. So it's really foreign to me, that concept. But what you just said then, it made me think, did you see this and see an opportunity and actually see, you were running a race in the corporate world and maybe the race was a bit too slow and you were like, you know what, that race actually looks a little more challenging, a little harder, a little faster, a little bit more what, I want to have a go at?
I think if I had the opportunity to, take some risks and bring some of my creativity to a corporate world, something that actually, let me follow, I guess, a wild idea. Because essentially I see things and I wonder, why isn't that happening? And I saw a gap when I started Stylerunner and I thought, why is no one doing that? So I think if there was that scope in a corporate, perhaps I would actually have just been quite happy. You know, I guess it's more about the doing and the creating, which is lacking in a corporate. So that gap and ability to chase it wasn't there. And when I saw it in the big wide world, it's the naive ones that actually, you know, commit themselves to it and don't know what you're signing up for. But yeah, here I am.
So, and I kind of interrupted you when you were alluding to, you were getting very close to, obviously you got exposure in the UK, I think you said, to startup world. And maybe as an entree into giving everyone a good idea of exactly what Stylerunner is, if they're not already buying all of their product from there, they should be. Maybe tell us, maybe through the prism of how the idea came about and even what the vision was from the beginning.
So I was working in London at this really cool startup, which we like to call a Netflix for hipsters. Check it out. It's called Mubi. Very, very cool. I loved my job, loved what I was doing there. But all of a sudden, I started to see some really cool Flyknit Nikes. And I was like, I need those. And I was going to Bikram yoga 5 days a week. And all of a sudden, I wanted to, you know, kind of buy something better and cooler and upgrade, as women do when they shop quite often. And I realised that there just wasn't enough variety to, I guess, satisfy my shopping desires when it came to my sportswear. So I was living in London, and the same problem occurred whether you were living in Sydney or Melbourne or New York. Really was 5 or 6 major labels anywhere in the world, and that was it. And I also didn't like shopping at sports stores, which are very masculine, a little bit warehousey, and sometimes a bit discounty. So I took the idea of, I guess, taking what's being done for luxury fashion and applying it to sportswear. I didn't know if that would take off, because really no one had applied it in, I guess, what could be seen as materialistic or superficial. It really is just making things look prettier in many ways. And no one had done that from sportswear, where people go, that's not relevant, we don't need that. But I took that risk and tried it, and it took off and has been growing rapidly ever since.
So just out of curiosity, this is a little question around what it takes. Obviously, a fantastic career previously, but I assume concepts like user experience design, full stack, various types of checkouts, fulfillment, shipping, and you could probably name a laundry list. Did you know anything about any of these things when prior to starting?
Not really. I was looking after the digital marketing at my previous startup, so I was all across all sorts of retargeting and banners and, CRM and segmenting audiences, but I had no idea how to start an online store. I gave myself about 3 months to launch a store because it was coming up to summer and timing's important. So in about 3 months, I had about 4 hours sleep a night. When I wasn't working, I was learning. And I went to every conference I could. I read every book that anyone recommended. I Googled anything that I didn't understand. And there is an enormous amount you can find out on Google, particularly now. More and more information just continues to flood onto the net. But I really was just writing down as many notes as I could, listening to speakers at conferences, and then I'd stalk them and ask them 1,000 questions. And really, one of the best things you can do is ask experts. People are afraid to do that. I had, no budget. People were like, what is this idea? And I'd be asking about their $300,000 website product. And by asking questions and finding out what their product had, I knew what I wanted to work towards. I might not have been able to afford it then, but I quickly got an education from people who are working at the best companies on what I should want to have.
So I find that really interesting because, the whole topic of conversation is in around this ecosystem and it coming together. And I wanted to, first of all, take you back again to 2012. And the reason I want to do that is one of the things I worry about in some ways when I hear ideas behind startups and what it's about is that, to be perfectly honest, when I started out back in year 2000, there was the dot-com boom going on, but practically speaking at a grassroots level, what you did is you went down, you started a business. It was a milk bar, it made websites, it was whatever, right? You went and got a registered certificate and then you went in and the first thing you did is you tried to make some money so that you could eat and hopefully not have to go back to the crappy job that you had before. I worry that the weight of momentum or the messaging that's out there says dream a great idea up, Don't worry about the underlying business fundamentals of it. Go knock on the doors of some wealthy people. Go live kind of a dream life, and maybe that's sending potentially the wrong message. And I just wanted to see that in your head when we go back to 2012. And I wonder, beyond Google, what was actually around you, or what was available to you to actually help you get started and make that massive, leap of faith and take that huge risk in your own life?
There wasn't an awful lot. I did have to, at that stage, I looked to a lot of the companies that were doing really well in the US. But essentially, I learned a lot from case studies and what other businesses were doing. Sometimes not even businesses that were in e-commerce, but it could be about a software as a service business, and it could be about how they iterated quickly and they let go of what wasn't fundamental to their solution. So I really wished I had more access to businesses that were fast growing, that had been through a lot of trouble or a lot of problems, and how they solved those. And there's probably more access to those sort of case studies now. The one thing that I took away from, I'm sure you all know the book, The Lean Startup by Rhys, but...
We gave it to everyone for Christmas, so...
There you go. You guys give everyone breakfast, free breakfast too, so this is two good things I've heard about you. It's just in the last half hour. It's great. Just plugging anyone that's after a job, I don't know. But so the lean startup is the approach we took. We essentially didn't go, we had a fairly large budget. This is still a business that has been self-funded. So we could have taken the approach of, let's buy that $300,000 platform. Let's spend $1 million on marketing and...
So you had investors from day one?
No.
Right. I'm sorry. I thought I misheard you. I thought you said we had a large budget.
Well, we did.
Yeah.
Didn't come from investors.
Right.
It's still a family-owned business. Yep. But yeah, we have put a lot into this, and we had different ways we could have gone about that. We could have gone with the old traditional marketing approach would have been billboards, buses, and it would have been launched with a bang. But we took the lean startup approach. We were still testing an idea. Like I said, now it makes sense that everyone wants to buy their sportswear in a beautiful, luxurious type, site. But back then, we really didn't know. And one of the perfect examples of how that worked in our favour is we really looked to, a brand that we love and we still, we have on board now is Lululemon. And when I looked at starting a startup, I saw they're obviously a public company. I had a look at their revenue and they were turning over $1 billion. And they were growing at 30 to 40% year on year. At that scale is enormous. So I thought, right, that's a pattern. This is big. There's an opportunity here. And we couldn't get Lululemon on at that stage, but we bought on some really beautiful labels out of the US, which were very similar. They had huge celebrity followings, et cetera, et cetera. And when we launched, no one bought them. So we had made assumptions, obviously, before we went to market around what our product offering should be. But because we did it in a lean way, it was able to be, it was a small loss, and we were able to fund the rest of our money into the product that works, which is exactly what the lean startup is about. Test your assumptions before you put too much money into them, and go where the data is telling you. Deliver to the consumers what they want to purchase.
I think, that's very interesting. And one of the things I mentioned yesterday in my presentation is, never bet the house on things. And it's such an important kind of concept because, you don't know it. You can find out in this, in this age. I wanted to ask you, so you felt that you were in a position you didn't need to go outside of the market for money, but it's so not just about investment. And I suppose Pradeep will be joining us in a minute, but I wanted to ask, it's very, very early on with LaunchVic. This is obviously a government initiative, but what would have been maybe not a game changer, but what are the resources around you that you really could have used? And fundamentally, what's your advice for Pradeep in that sense? What should he do to help the next generation of style runners?
I think that there definitely needs to be, it has come so far even since when I, first launched the business, but I think there's still a long way to go between the government funding, the potential next big success stories in Australia. Because ultimately, these businesses are going to give back. They're going to create jobs. They're going to add to the GDP. And I know that sometimes the conversation behind it is, but why should they? We need it more. And there's this struggle between who should get it and why. But I think we really need to change the culture around government funding. And it needs to be I guess, what's best for the country is really helping businesses that have great potential, become what they can be. And the more that happens and the greater the return on the government funding, the more they will help more businesses. So we really have to let go of that, but we deserve it more. And if that means that we don't get it and someone else does, then I'm glad to see innovation grow in Australia. But I think that so for example, what would I offer as advice? In our business, we always ask as many customers as we can what they love, what do they need, what should we be doing better. So we go to our top customers, we're always asking for feedback, and I think there needs to be more of that, reaching out to startups and speaking to the actual startups, not just a few of them, but speak to as many as you can until someone's knocked on my door. I feel like there still could be more, and all I want to do is share information of what startups need and what they'll go through and what help we require. And as I would do in a startup, which is keep going, keep asking questions, never stop at that. There's always more you'll learn from the next customer. I think the government needs to do for their funding approach, speak to the next startup, because even within a year, there are enormous changes and shifts in technologies that perhaps they could help companies get access to. So always keeping a really close loop between startups and founders that just doesn't stop, a continual feedback loop.
On just two closing questions that I think are quite close to your heart. I know you spoke about this morning. It's actually been an ongoing dialogue all the time. Young women in business, in particular, entrepreneurship, and when you seem to fuse entrepreneurship and technology together, you end up with a room full of guys. What? Not tonight though. I just wanted to ask you what you think perhaps the fundamentals reason behind that is.
I think that there are still a lot of cultural stereotypes around technology and engineering. And I think that growing up, these decisions around where do you want your career to end, they start from when girls are really young and we're watching movies, and engineering has often been associated with kind of nerdiness and social isolation, and that really isn't the case. So I think that there needs to be a better portrayal of the career options and the career successes that are actually pretty modern and innovative and cool. I think as long as there is a gender gap in technology, it is going to be difficult because women want to be in places that are pretty neutral. They don't want to be isolated and be a minority. I'm speaking for out of personal experiences and from feedback I've heard. But ideally, we would love to be in environments which are neutral and which we do not feel isolated and amongst a minority. And there's a really great report that came out of Silicon Valley recently. I'm sure maybe some of you have heard of it, called Elephant in the Valley, which was a survey of 200 plus women in engineering and technology and the sort of discrimination that they've faced, their real stories, and some of them are pretty shocking. So I think there's definitely that in the minds of women too. We know it's a difficult and perhaps an uneven battle to win as we want to kind of progress through that career as well.
I didn't mean to pull you back onto this massive topic because we could talk about all night. I think the contribution I'd make is it's kind of scary in a lot of ways that here we have this forward-thinking future of our country, industry as described by government, and yet what we're talking to are challenges that maybe we thought were starting to be well addressed decades and decades ago, creeping back in an interesting way. So it's a massive topic, and I know that it's one that's very close to your heart. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for sharing in general. There's going to be questions from the audience, but it's been amazing that you can spend the time with us tonight. Yeah, cheers.